is 10 minutes, and so I'd like to save, I guess, half of that for questions. But what I'm going to give you is not the basics. It's going to be class 401, okay? And so if you're new to any of this conversation, don't chastise yourself. Just say, oh wow, there's a whole other world there that I can explore and I can understand. But I'm going to be speaking to a very, very specific point that's just a tiny little part of that diagram that you have up there. And I am trying to be mindful of the time, but I also want you to work from the side of your brain that understands compassion and justice. And so I thought this is how I usually start, with something that's like a challenge to us. And what I had is a Rumi poem, and now it's not cooperating. That's typical. You have a sheet in front of you. I think I'll close with the Rumi poem, that way we won't waste the time. There's a sheet that did everyone get one of these? There you go. So maybe a couple people can share. So what I'm going to talk about is called and like I said, this is going to be really, really fast. But what I'm going to talk about is called fair chance ordinances. It can be fair chance housing ordinances, but fair chance ordinances is just a buzzword for local legislation that has been passed in other places. And I'm just here to educate you about it. I'm not suggesting that this is something that we should do. What I'm here to tell you about is this is something that other communities have done and could be a part of the conversation about, especially pointed to your question about, viewing us as all of us having some skin in the game, not just everything being Cleveland-centered, right? So some communities have done this as municipal ordinances. For example, Seattle, Washington is kind of the gold standard of how to deal with this. And Cook County has done it, includes Chicago, has done it as a county resolution, a county ordinance, or a county law. So what it deals with is criminal background screening. And again, that's a topic that we could spend the whole morning on, because how it's done, how accurate it is, who does it, why it's done, what kind of algorithm is used, what kind of footprint is left. All of those things could be a whole other conversation. This morning, in the 5 minutes that we're going to deal with this, I'm just going to give you like a little outline of what fair chance ordinances do in other places. And the reason why it's important in the context of homelessness is because many times people that are experiencing homelessness are also having contact with the criminal legal system, because communities treat homelessness as if it were a crime. So you can have, public urination, public trespass, or sleeping on a bench, littering. I had a client that had a littering conviction from Lakewood, and it kept him out of subsidized housing in Cleveland until we could get that cleared up. So all those little things, especially misdemeanors, which is the thing that many people don't understand, misdemeanors have an impact on people's ability to get housing. So many people that are caught up in the criminal legal system think, well, if I can plead down to a misdemeanor, then I won't have, quote, a felony on my record, and everything will be good. Because they're thinking in the employment context. But in the housing context, especially, we know for a fact, in the subsidized housing context, because a subsidy makes housing affordable, right? That misdemeanors have the same, if not more, impact on people's ability to qualify for housing. And that was a project that NEOC and some other organizations, LMM, Fair Housing Center, we all did together. We went through and read the tenant selection plans of HUD-assisted housing, and we found that misdemeanors have more of it. There are more disqualifications from subsidized housing providers because of misdemeanors for a longer period of time than for felonies. It's ironic that that's the case. So these categories that I have here tell you some of the ways these fair chance ordinances work. So the first thing is that in some communities, they've carved out and only applies to what I'm talking about, HUD-assisted housing. But in most of them, it applies to all housing. And that's important because the bulk of our housing stock is private housing, right? So if a private landlord can screen for criminal background, which can be a proxy for race because of the disparate impact of Black people having contact with the criminal justice system. It doesn't have to be intentional, right? Disparate impact means that you can have a neutral rule that has a discriminatory effect. So I'm not talking about racial animus. I'm not saying that people are doing it because they want to keep Black people out. I'm saying the impact is that it has more of an effect on Black people. The problem is that with criminal background screening, 100 million people, at least in the United States, have had some contact with the criminal justice system. That's 1/3 of the adult population. White people can hide behind that because when they go to apply, there's no stereotype, oh, you must have had some contact with the criminal justice system. So they can either skim over that or no one asks, right? The question about criminal background. It's not so easy if you're a Black male of a certain age, of a certain municipality, right? Because you're going to carry with you either explicit bias or implicit bias. So for 5 minutes, I'm just going to cut through some of these examples. So apply to all housing. That levels the playing field for everybody. Eliminate screening. It's kind of a bandbox for housing applications. So they don't even look. Eliminate look-back periods. One reason is because there's no scientific data that says a person that has a criminal background is not able to be a successful tenant. So if you're going to use science, what we do know is people that get housing after being released are less likely to recidivate. So it's in our interest as a community that people that are recently released get housing immediately. So if you have a look-back period, you're impeding what would make them successful and us successful as a community. Limit to directly related convictions. So that, again, narrowing the application of a criminal conviction. Individualized assessment and appeal rights. This already is, if people follow the Fair Housing Guidance of 2016, the law. A landlord should not use a blanket rule to keep people out. If they have a rule that says, like, no arson convictions, for example, then they have a legitimate, substantial, non-discriminatory reason, which is the standard, legitimate, substantial, non-discriminatory reason to want to screen that person. However, the HUD guidance says a landlord is required to give someone an individualized assessment, meaning, okay, you haven't passed the rung that I need you. I have a legitimate, substantial, non-discriminatory reason, but I should look at you individually. So say that person is a woman that was involved in domestic violence, and the arson conviction that she got was related to her trying to get away from an abuser. So there's two things that should kick in. It should be that individualized assessment, and it should be the violation, protection against violence against women act. But that doesn't apply to all kinds of housing. So this individualized assessment would help that person overcome the 3 things that the landlord could use to keep them out. Screening done after an applicant qualifies. So that would keep landlords from cherry picking, right? So they have their regular tenant screening criteria. Then after that, they say, oh, these are the 10 people that qualify. Then do the criminal background screening. So if you're within 1,000 feet of a school or daycare, you may be concerned about renting to someone that has a conviction for a sex offense, not because you're concerned about the person with the sex offense, but you're concerned about the state law that may keep them from living in that place, right? And that's, I hope you picked up on that nuance. I'm not saying that you have a concern about people with sex offenses. I'm saying that there's a state law that may impede you from renting to someone that's within it, if your property's within, your rental property's within 1,000 feet of school or daycare, which is a whole other conversation about whether we should have limits, right? Excludes arrests and pending charges. Again, that's because of mass incarceration and the discriminatory impact of our criminal justice system against African Americans and Latinx. And then the back side of the pages are procedures to enforce the ordinance, but I'm already past the 5 minutes. So I wanted to give people an opportunity to ask me some questions, because I know I kind of whizzed through all that. But I guess the invitation, the reason why I wanted this little space to talk to you is that these are complex ideas. They require study. And so what could happen is we could have multiple study groups throughout Cuyahoga County looking at what other communities have done in terms of fair chance housing ordinances, talking to people that have lived experience to figure out whether this provision or that provision would help. Whether it's going to make things better or make things worse. Is it going to make the dialogue, the conversation about everybody being housed more of a polemic, or is it going to be an opportunity for us to all get on the same page and understand that everyone needs to be housed, and it's in our best interest of everyone, that everyone be housed, right? That's one of the lessons of the pandemic. But whether that lesson is soaked in, seeps into this kind of conversation about who gets housed and who doesn't, that's the conversation that we need to have in a way that's informed and says, well, there's another community that's doing this, let's look at how they evaluate it. Is it impacting, is it helping the people that it's intended to help? And can we let the people that are most impacted lead the conversation? Can we learn from them? But again, I wanted to save the last 5 minutes for people who might have questions. Okay, yes.
So a 16-year-old LGBTQ kid gets kicked out of his house, and he understands all of this. He understands none of it. And he may not even have the education to read what we just put on the board. So where are navigators? Where is the role of navigators who can somehow make sense of all this?
Yeah, that's not what I do. I mean, I always call Chris. I always call Chris and Jim Schlatten. It's an important question.
I mean, is that what the church could be, is relatively speaking, educated people who can read? I work with the refugee children, so I know what it's like to come to read a word. But anyway, apart from that, where is the role of the church in helping somebody navigate all this to go from X to Y to Z?
I guess what I'm here to say is that if the rule doesn't allow you to navigate, no matter how many people you have holding your hand, you're not getting there. And so we need to create rules that allow people to have housing. If landlords can continue to screen for criminal background, and the close link between homelessness and criminal background are there, then you can hold somebody's hand all you want. They're not getting in. A landlord's not going to be required to rent to them. The same with the point that Chris was making about the source of income. They can be able to afford whatever rent, whatever community, but if your community has a long history of NIMBYism, so that there's no subsidized housing, there's no low-income tax credit housing which is required to take the voucher, if there's none of that, then it doesn't matter. They can afford the rent because there's no one that's going to be required to rent to them. So I'm really talking at a little bit different level. I'm talking about the rules that make it hard for people to get housing. And this is, like I said, this is just a small sliver, but it's an important sliver because of mass incarceration impacting African Americans and Latinx, and the long legacy of us using rules, the United States using rules, to keep people from home ownership and accessing different neighborhoods. And so when you understand that legacy, then you know that you can't just start by helping individuals. You have to do both. You have to help individuals, and you have to recreate the rules. So this is an opportunity that I think churches are really good at. Churches are good at organizing rules, understanding rules, having study groups, talking to neighbors, understanding the dynamic, because it impacts you both ways. There's probably no one in this room that doesn't have a family member that doesn't have a criminal conviction. And there's probably nobody in this room that doesn't have a family member that owns property that could potentially be rental property. So we understand it from all the sides. The challenge is, how do we make it work for everybody? Yes.
Say you have a group of citizens, a group of people from church who want to seriously discuss this in their community. Do you have ideas on where to start? Like, who are the best people in the community? Is it city council? Is it the mayor? Is it, some other? Where do you go to start?
So if you want to start having the study groups, I co-chair the Advocacy and Policy Reentry Committee for the Greater Cleveland Reentry Strategy Coalition. And so we have, 20, 30 members, numerous people with lived experience, that we could start a study group with you, right? Especially if you're open to having someone with lived experience kind of be the moderator, the facilitator, because you really have to have someone. Usually I start, if I have one 10 minutes, usually start either collaborating with someone with lived experience or showing a video of someone telling their story about how their criminal background has impeded them getting housing. But, we can't do everything all at once. But yes, if you're interested in a study group, I'm here to help you figure out how that could happen and who could be a part of it. Because like I said, the Seattle ordinance, I wanted to copy it for you all, but it's like 20 pages. But one of the whereas clauses is from the Urban Institute study in Cuyahoga County. It says people will be less likely to recidivate if they get housing within the first year of being released from incarceration. And with look-back periods, that means that's totally against what we're trying to do, because most look-back periods are like 7 years, 5 years, 3 years. Well, you've already passed the 1 year. You've already got the person recidivated. Okay. Yeah, I can. Sorry, I tried to stay within the 10 minutes. Okay, hold on. So let's take a deep breath. I know I'm a lawyer and can talk a lot. And fast, right? But at least you can hear me. Oh. All right, so let's take a deep breath before we go to lunch. Oh, you're not going to lunch? Yeah, okay, all right. I'm hungry, sorry. All right, so this is a poem. It's one of my favorites, and I think of it a lot of times when I'm in court. So it's a Rumi poem. Oh Solomon, you are the champion of the oppressed. You give justice to the little guys, and they don't get any littler than us. These are gnats. We are tiny metaphors for frailty. Can you defend us? Who has mistreated you? Our complaint is against the wind. Well, says Solomon, you have pretty voices, you gnats, but remember, a judge cannot just listen to one side. I must hear both litigants. Of course, agreed the gnats. Summon the east wind, calls out Solomon, and the wind arrives almost immediately. What happened to the gnats, plaintiffs? Gone. Such is the way of every seeker who comes to complain at the high court. When the presence of God arrives, where are the seekers? First there's dying, then union, like the gnats inside the wind.
Now, you heard her say she was going to be here at lunch, which is delightful because we are going to have conversation around the tables. We don't get a total break here. There are also some guests here who are going to be sprinkled among you, both at lunch and during the time of the game, the simulation that we are about to experience together. So I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves, and then Sharon can introduce the game experience that she has invented, and we are so proud of her. So, if you're a provider, would you please come up here so we can meet you, and that way I'm going to come up, and then I'm going to invite you all to go sprinkle yourselves among the tables for the simulation experience, so that you're among us. Come on, don't be shy, don't be shy. You're not a provider. Whether you're a provider or you're somebody who lives and experiences the work of one of these shelters. So,
That's our speakers here, right?
yeah, so if you're here from an agency, from a shelter, anything, we want you to be a part of the conversation when we do this simulation. All right?
Yeah.
Felicia, would you start and just tell us, and I'm going to ask you to come up here before you go out to the game. Tell us who you're with, briefly, what you do.
Hello, my name is Felicia Perry. I'm the development specialist at Family Promise of Greater Cleveland. It is a shelter for families experiencing homelessness, and I'm the development specialist there. I help with grant research, individual donors, and volunteers.
Hi, my name is Lisa Fritz, and I'm also with Family Promise. I am our donor relations manager, and I work in fundraising.
I am Court Landefeld. I'm clerk of session at Paramount Presbyterian Church, and I am introducing to this group and also to the Presbytery looking at how many churches are M25, how many churches are Habitat for Humanity participating in that in whatever way, the intersection of those, and then also trying to get the churches in the Presbytery that are not in either of those two programs inspired to become parts of those programs.
Who's a Matthew 25 church? How many of you here are? Okay, keep your hands up. How many of you have been, as a congregation, part of a Habitat bill in your congregation? Okay, that's your job.
Exactly. Good. Thank you.
That's great.
Hi everyone, my name is Morgan Smith and I'm the Fund Development and Communications Director for Metanoia Project. So we will be opening on November 15th like we do every year. And we have the same two locations as last year. So we will be at Franklin Circle Church and at Bethany Presbyterian. So thank you for all of you.
Are you looking for locations on the east side at all?
We have not yet, no.
Do
But
you
if there's
want
east-
to?
If there's East Siders that want to talk to
Yeah,
us.
this is not just West Siders.
Oh, okay, great. So, just if people are looking to provide meals, I know I have a lot of people I know here because they do such great things for me. We do a hot meal that is donated every night, and churches are a huge part of that. And then we also are continuing our breakfast program from last year. So, toaster pastries, granola bars, things they can kind of grab and go. We have a toaster, so things like that. Also, we're looking for a new executive director. We're posting the job tomorrow, okay as well. But if you are not a meal volunteer and you want to be or your church isn't, please let me know. We are currently only located on the west side.
Hi, my name is Maggie Bryce. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm the education coordinator at NEOC, Northeast Ohio Coalition for the Homeless. So I coordinate the Street Voices Speakers Bureau, which is coming up here today. We also do like webinars, workshops on housing issues. We work with the Fair Housing Center.
Say a little bit more about Street Voice Speakers. Where would they go?
Sure. So the Street Voices Speakers Bureau is a group of people with lived experience of homelessness who work with us, with me primarily, to tell their stories at events like this one, sometimes churches, libraries. I know the One Community Reads program is coming up, and a lot of the different libraries are reading Invisible Child. It's a great book. If you haven't read it, I'm reading it now. And so we're going to be having speakers go to different library branches to talk about that. And they also participate in a lot of our webinars and workshops on the root causes of homelessness. And so if you have events coming up where you are doing education on homelessness, it's always best to hear directly from the people most impacted by the problem you're trying to solve. So, great. Oh, and I just want to say Chris is also here from NEOC in the back. And Sincere is one of our speakers back there. He's awesome. He does a lot of mutual aid work in the community. He's going to be here for the games too. And then I'll turn it to you.
Hello, my name is Cherie West. My name is Cherie West. I am a member of NEOC's Homeless Congress, and I also volunteer for the Street Voice Speakers Bureau to talk about the journey into homelessness. And I am also a founder and executive director of True West Homes. We provide supportive assistance to individuals who have found permanent housing. We give them financial assistance so they can remain housed.
Great. Okay, so I'm going to invite those who are up here now to go back, sprinkle among the tables. Cheryl, would you show them where we're going to be playing these games? Which are not.
Sharon would like everybody to find the table and she will explain from back.
Okay, she's going to
there,
explain the games. Steve?
Yes, are there letters or numbers on the name tags that help people find a table?
No, that's not for the game. That's for lunch.
Oh, that's food.
That's,
forget
that's
it.
food. That's because they can't remember
Forget
what
it.
they ordered. And I am a chicken. I am a seed. So please go back, and then we will say grace before our lunch break.
One of the things, some people